Hello. Yes, this is still happening today. We had some technical difficulties. We are in 4 parts of the country right now, but we've been able to come together. I'm thrilled to be here with Matthew Lambert, Dan Frezza, Adam Martel. They are tremendous leaders in philanthropy in general, but I know they have a deep passion and ability in the realm of donor participation, hence, the name of this group. So welcome. Matthew, Dan, Adam, if you could please start by introducing yourselves briefly. I think that will be great for the audience.
Hey, everybody. I'm Matthew Lambert, and I serve as the Vice President for University Advancement at W&M and Mary and the CEO of the W&M and Mary Foundation. I've been here just a little bit more than 10 years at W&M and Mary, and am deeply passionate about broad-based engagement and participation as one of the pillars of our profession, and making sure that we can do that in the long run, not just focusing on a single campaign. So delighted to be in this conversation with you, Lewis.
Thank you so much, Matthew, as always. Dan.
Dan Frezza. I'm the Chief Advancement Officer here at the College of Charleston and the Executive Director of the College of Charleston Foundation. I'm the new guy in the role. I've been here for a little over 4 months, but I've got nearly 20 years in the industry at a host of really good institutions, including W&M and Mary, Appalachian State, NC State, of growing broad-based donor support, participation, and in Matthew's way too, building it the right way, building things for longevity and developing everything in a rooted culture.
Lovely. And we'll go a little bit into the details of that, because I know you have very clear and specific views on the best ways to do this. And some of that involves technology, hence Adam. Hi, Adam. It's great to be here with you.
Hey, Lewis. It's great to be here. I'm Adam Martel. I'm the CEO at Givesy. We're the first digital gift agreement platform and solutions company working to allow donors and frontline fundraisers to document gift agreements of all sizes a bit easier. Before this, I was the CEO and founder of the first AI company in the nonprofit tech space. And before that, I was a frontline fundraiser. And I'm so excited for this conversation.
Lovely. So we have a broad variety of people who join these calls. Typically, everybody who's here with us, please feel free to ask questions at any point. We have a little bit of an agenda, but actually I don't know, Matthew, Dan, Adam, if you'll agree, but these conversations tend to be more valuable when we have that interaction. So we welcome your comments and your questions. Very basic. First question for the whole group is, why broad-based part? What's the case for that? As Matthew said, what is the case for taking the long-term view of having a vigorous alumni and donor community?
Maybe I'll jump in, and then I know Adam and Dan will join me. I think one of the great things, all three of us share an agreement that the future of our profession, those of us working in advancement and philanthropy, is going to be predicated upon building a long-term, broad-based group of donors for our respective organizations, who are looking at that organization as something where they have a vested interest in it. I think one of the challenges in our profession over the last decade, we have seen campaigns getting larger and larger. And we announced totals that now begin with B. And when we're talking about billions, it's very easy for a donor who's giving $1,000 or $500 or $25 to feel as though their gift doesn't matter, that as a donor, they have no reasonable impact on that organization. I think also in our profession, we have become so fixated on finite periods of time, whether it's this quarter, this fiscal year, or this campaign. And when you look at some of the most significant gifts that each of us has worked on in our respective organizations, most generally those result in years, if not decades, of donors giving back in a meaningful way that take place over long periods of time. And so what we, I think, as leaders in this profession need to be focused on is, how do we grow that as a long-range, broad-based focus for all of us, where we're looking at getting more people involved and having more people feel as though their gift is involved in making a difference to that organization. So it's something I know Dan and Adam both have seen in their careers as well, But I think for the stability and vitality of our profession in the long run, that's going to be critical.
Yeah, I'll come back to culture, but I'll start with something that really clicked for me in the last couple of years, which is it's a business model. Trust and confidence matter. And we know that generationally now amongst our emerging philanthropists that, trust in institutions is a real challenge. It's an obligation that we have to earn it. Nobody enjoys going back to the business that reinvents itself every 4 or 5 years. And it's a poor business model to reacquire donors every 4 or 5 years or customers. And so having a culture that can be built in a way that is enduring and in creating trust and goodwill is for longevity. Getting back to the first piece, which I've always adopted, is broad-based support is one of the most democratic forms of support that you can have in annual giving. In fact, Matthew used to say this, over and over again, which is annual giving is democratic. Anybody can do it. And if they don't do it, it's a vote. And if they're voting, we should listen. And so developing a system that is not transactional, but is rooted in the ability to earn trust in a way that allows donors to have input, say, and confidence. You're building a program that you can then have security, confidence in existing to then focus efforts on building on top of. And so all of my success has always been rooted in retention, building a program that acquires a high functioning retention rate of all populations of donors, not so that we can sleep easier at night, that we can take our attention and focus it in areas where we need to address it. So whether it's having a retention rate that's increasing for our newest donors so that we can then put more attention on acquiring those donors that we've missed the opportunity on, or maybe those that we need to reactivate that we lost over time.
Yeah, definitely taking the long-term approach here is always a good idea. I think with most things, back in the 90s, my mother was a frontline fundraiser. And after school, I used to go, and she was in the gift processing side, then a frontline fundraiser. I used to go help her open up checks. And she used to tell me all the time that kindness and empathy are way more important than how you make the ask and what you make the ask about. It's really expressing kindness and empathy. And I remember talking to her at the beginning of COVID and her just saying, donors are going to want to have kindness and empathy expressed to them for any situation that they're in, because everybody's life was changing during COVID. But that kindness and that empathy that we show from our organizations towards our donors, whether it's a short-term relationship or long-term relationship, Matthew and Dan, I know William, Mary, you all have done that better than anybody, and your retention rates and your participation are the proof of that. But kindness and empathy over the long term, I think, is crucial to the strategy here.
Okay, devil's advocate here, because I always feel for those who are in the donor participation project in our professional life who are listening to you and are saying, yes, that's beautiful. My small development operation of 2 people, 0.3, can't afford this. Like, we can't think long term. We have a lot of pressure. My counter remark to that is often building trust and emphasizing retention actually pays off. It's long term, but it's not so long term. It's not 20 years down the road. So have you seen that link happen on a time frame that's more condensed?
Yeah, so let me take that one, Louis. And this could become a larger conversation, so I don't want to go down this rabbit hole entirely. Prior to my last tenure, I was at a small regional public with an annual giving team of 2.5. We shared one of our other most valuable staff members. It was myself and a person that ran Phone-a-thon, did annual giving stewardship. We were outside the top 10 in participation within the entire UNC system. Within 3 years, we were inside the top 4. And the budget didn't change. It was about intentionality. We built a student philanthropy program. We focused on stewardship of all donors at all levels, and we thought about targeted asks and very specific segmentation. We did not have any of the technologies that blossomed 5 and 10 years after. We were using the same antiquated systems I think everybody was using at the same point, but we were intentional. We thought about a strategy. We thought about where we could look at mathematical gains. So for instance, first and second year out alums, we then focused on senior class gift. Those that celebrated reunions but didn't renew for the next 4 years, we focused on fulfilling those pledges. Those were small doses that took very little effort, but more time to be intentional and strategic that elevated the program. So I've had the luxury of being at programs that looked like that. I was at medium-based programs that, was what William and Mary looked like when I started there over 10 years ago. And I had the blessing to be at a program that was the latest version of William and Mary, which was one of the largest annual giving teams in the country that was fueled with analytics and technology. So every step of the way, you were able to be successful. But a 2.5 team, 2.5 FT team was very successful at that point.
Bravo.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm not sure it's an either or, Lewis. I think it's a both and. And as Dan noted, I think that it does take a commitment to focusing on long run. It takes a commitment to those more relationship-based approaches. Now, in annual giving, we have a combination of sort of mass market and highly personalized, and we need to, depending on our organization, think about both of those opportunities. I actually think the problem is less around resources and more around leadership. I've been blessed to work with 2 presidents who were willing to invest in, focus on, and be with us to do what is historically thought of as a lower ROI activity, because they were willing to invest in the long run beyond just a single fiscal year or a single campaign. I think the shortened tenures of university presidents is problematic. I think that leads to a shortened tenure in vice presidents. And I think that leads to a shortened focus on your time horizon, that you tend to focus on that immediate period that you think is going to have the impact, whether it's that fiscal year or that campaign, versus a long-term, broad-based approach. The sort of title of our webinar today is around finding our humanity in fundraising technology. And I think there are some real opportunities here for us to leverage technology, but that humanity is always going to be the core of what we do. This is a people business. People give to people. They don't give to machines. And so we need to always make sure that we're focused on how do we keep the humanity in the work that we do.
Yeah, one of the when we started Gravity, we started it back in 2016, and the sole focus of Gravity was to be the first artificial intelligence company in the space, and we were generating self-writing emails and trying to mimic a frontline fundraiser's cognitive abilities. And I remember the very first conference I spoke at, the first question I got was, do you really think that you can replace frontline fundraisers? And the answer, as it was then, it is now. It's heck no. I mean, we need frontline fundraisers to inspire donors to make gifts. What we don't need are frontline fundraisers spending a lot of time playing with data and doing things that aren't building relationships with donors. And Matthew, to your point about leadership, whether it's technology, Dan, whether it's strategy, whether it's culture, without true leadership, true leading from the front, not the back, none of that will work. And Dan, I imagine that when you turn programs around and the team starts winning, you see fundraisers stick around longer because everyone wants to be part of a winning team. No one wants to be part of a losing team. And I know in a startup, that's it every day. And I know in all of our cultures, if you can create a winning team, and a winning team starts with doing the right things every day and letting the score take care of itself, people will follow. And you guys are truly the best at that.
How does investing in this area through technology, through strategy, how does this support Major Gift campaign fundraising? Matthew, you said something in our pre-chat that I really like about inheriting culture. I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts about that.
Yeah, Dan touched on this. Culture is at the core of our success in this business. And if you have a culture that's focused on relationships, focused on growing those and expanding those over time, then when you're working with technology partners, you're trying to find ways to enhance that, not to replace that, but how can you enhance that? And we've had great success working with Kestrel Linder at Give Campus and Brent at Evertrue and Adam now at Givesy, and thinking of this as a true partnership. How can you bring in those outside of your organization who have solutions and products that can make better what we do, that can enhance what we do, that can extend the reach of what we do. And I think that again comes back to culture, because if you've got a culture that's focused on doing the right things, then you're not trying to change or alter or replace with technology. You're trying to enhance, support, strengthen the work that you do. And I think that's why culture is so critical. in this?
Yeah, I look at technology, Lewis, in two different ways. There are those partners that are there for efficiency's sake, and you don't endanger losing authenticity. And so, for instance, look at Blackbaud, and Target Analytics. That is a resource. There's no risk of losing authenticity, but it enables us to do a job far more efficient and more effective than we did before. Then there are partners such as Adam that have authenticity and the ability to lose our ability to be a genuine fundraising unit, because they're looking to adapt and add on. They're adding the reach that we would not normally have. And so that's where you get into things like volunteer management systems, where you're thinking really critically, not about the efficiency and the effectiveness, but does this become an extension of our team? Does this allow us to contain and maintain that culture that Matthew was talking about? And so that's why I love what Adam is tinkering with now, being one of the first gift agreement digital firms, because that is kind of a bit of both. But the conversation is, how do you use technology not to replace people, but how do you maintain the culture we develop? And I think that extension is something that is keenly in my mind when I look at new partnerships. The efficiency ones, I think they're there, they'll continue to develop, but you don't have to dissect them as much. You're looking at them monetarily versus Adam or what Brent at Evertrue have developed, or Castro at Give Campus. We really are thinking about not just the software, the product, but how does it make us do our jobs better, but also maintain that they are thinking about our culture, our credibility in the process.
Hey, Dan, with you and Matthew are one of the first folks to actually sort of help a company get up and running with volunteer management. Can you talk a little bit about that process? Because I think that type of partnership where, you enter into a partnership with a technology vendor and the vendor says, listen, I don't have all the answers, but I'm a partner with you. I'm here to solve this with you. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I'm inspired every time I hear that story.
Yeah, I mean, so I'll jump in, and Matthew, at least something let me know, because there's two pieces. One is, in our culture was innovation. And at the time that we started that partnership, Matthew, as a advancement leader, was already pushing the team to think about getting away from those standard off-the-shelf products, those more efficiency-based products, because they were costing us our ability to manage relationships effectively. And so we were already going down the road of bringing in outside engineers to think about building something that allowed us to be both effective, efficient, but also our authenticity being protected. I got to give Kestrel Linder, full credit on being quite audacious as a partner. He called multiple times. We simply said, we're not interested in the product you're selling, but we have this solution that we're trying to get to. And we worked on developing a system, which is the VMS portal for Give Campus, to position management of volunteers in a fundraising environment in the way that a program deserves. Making sure that the volunteer finds it easy. It's a 3 to 5 step process to do everything they need. So thinking about the volunteer's time, that's one of the valuable pieces that we hear from volunteers all the time, is that I'm not on your payroll. I'm doing this out of goodwill. But also from a data science standpoint, making sure that we're not being just efficient with them, but that we're being good stewards of data, and we're collecting every step along the way that then allows the institution to do more progressive work. And so over a period of 7 months, we were the alpha and the beta test for that at William and Mary. And that incorporated what other products look like, what some home build solutions were leveraging, and more importantly, what staff and volunteers alike were sitting around the table saying we needed. And that firm, Give Campus, was able to build it, develop it, and over a period of 2 years, tinker it away until we ended up with a system that is intuitive for the volunteer, highly effective for the volunteer manager, even to the point where frontline gift officers were beginning to use it almost more than some of those off-the-shelf products that we also had at the same time.
Yeah, Adam, I'll just add, very often we have problems that we can't find solutions to. And this was one of those scenarios where we were sending spreadsheets back and forth to volunteers.
Oh, yeah.
And it clearly was not a great way to be doing business. And as we were thinking about scaling up from dozens of volunteers doing outreach solicitation to hundreds and thousands of volunteers doing this, we had to have a better way to do business. And colleges, universities, most nonprofits have a really hard time moving quickly on almost anything. And, when we can partner with someone outside of the nonprofit, they can move really, really quickly. I mean, our partnership with you at Givesy, Adam, has been one of those where we can give you a suggestion at 3:30, and by 5 o'clock you can come back with a fix to it. And that's how it developed for us with Give Campus. That's how it's developed for us with you all at GivesY, is that, we've got a problem we're trying to solve, and we're trying to find technological solutions to augment, support, as Dan said so well earlier, extend our reach, find ways to extend our reach further beyond what we're able to do on our own. And, I do think of it as a partnership. I do think of this as industry and outside of industry partnering together to try to find ways to make our work even better.
Yeah.
So if I may say, I just want to emphasize, and maybe you're aware or maybe you're not, but what your positioning, your approach to this is truly unique. I have a fairly good sense of how lots of fundraisers interact with technology, and it's most often from a passive perspective, and it feels like an onslaught of different products, different vendors who are each kind of trying to convince you of a different strategy that obviously supports their product. No. Yeah. So you started with a strategy. I'm just going to talk about the volunteer management system, but I'd love to hear what you guys have cooking right now. So, and what you're trying to solve for. But you started with a strategic imperative. We need to involve more volunteers, and then sought out solutions. And that, so starting from I think you started from the humanity, the authenticity, like Dan said. So maybe this can inspire others in the sector. No, is that do you see this model as being replicable? Do you think other fundraisers should be pushing more for what they need with their partners?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges we face in our profession is that when we get inbound outreach, that Dan mentioned Kestrel reaching out a number of times. Adam is probably not immune to reaching out to institutions. Very, very quickly people say, okay, well, talk to my person in advancement services, and let me push it over here and let them figure this out. When in reality, the people who are the end users of the technology need to be involved in helping to shape that. And so in the work that we've tried to do with partners, I think it's imperative that we have those on the front lines involved in this. That's been true for our work with Give Campus. It's been true for our work with GivesY. And it does have to be not just shoving this over and saying, okay, advancement services, you figure this out, but really how do we work together to make this better? And I think the more we use these partners, the more they get better as well. And that's only going to be good for our industry.
Yeah. I would say it's more of a what to watch for with good partners. You want a vendor, a relationship that's thinking about how they evolve with you, and not the off-the-shelf canned approach. I think I won't name those vendors, but those vendors that looked like that 10 years ago, there are far fewer of them today. And what I've appreciated about many of our new emerging technologies is that they are asking, how do we evolve? How do we get better? And I think that's a sign of a really good partner where you are. And I've seen that with several of the latest versions of, Adam's an example of that, but so are several of the others that are just thinking, how do we increase our effectiveness for you?
Yeah. For some reason, the stereotype of an entrepreneur is the person who thinks they know everything. But I think it's pretty obvious the great entrepreneurs are the ones who are humble enough to be able to listen more than they speak. And I certainly know that as an entrepreneur, our space in advancement, we have this stigma that we're sort of behind the times, that we don't innovate, that we don't adopt technology. But it's not quite true. The truth is that maybe all technology goes to advancement services, which doesn't quite make any sense because one person can't be responsible for managing every technology out there. But truly, entrepreneurs like me, you're not strong enough to stand by yourself until you're strong enough to stand by yourself. And before you're strong enough to stand by yourself, you need partners who sort of walk with you and stand with you and sort of help you figure things out. And there's no shame in not knowing everything. And I think that type of partnership where you can bounce ideas off each other, you don't have to enter a meeting thinking that you have to convince somebody of the next greatest thing. You can say, hey, listen, we're trying to solve this problem together. What ideas do you have? That's the type of partnership that I think all entrepreneurs in the space should really be looking at.
So if anything, I hope we can inspire some people to be more proactive and think that their strategic dreams can find a partner out there. I'd love to hear what led Adam in your relationship with Matthew and Dan to develop the Pledge product, where you were before. I hear a little bit of that journey, and I've heard a few inkling. I have a little bit of an inkling that that's going somewhere else now. So yeah, what's the story there?
Yeah, so we sold Gravity, the first AI company, about a year and a half ago, and as part of that sale, something unique happened. The PE firm that we sold to allowed me to start another company in the space that I was in, the nonprofit space. It doesn't usually happen. There's a strong non-compete, but K1 was kind enough to be able to allow me to start another company in this space. And so we started off as Give Now, Pay Later. We wanted to take Buy Now, Pay Later and apply it to mid-level giving, allowing $1,000 donor more flexible giving options to make a larger gift. And we just started to progress with people asking us if we could create little invoices for the Give Now, Pay Later payments. And quickly we realized that multi-year commitments, the ability to confirm a multi-year commitment and generate a gift agreement on the fly for frontline fundraisers was something that wasn't happening. And every VP that I talked to, I kept asking, hey, what's your threshold for gift agreements, for multi-year gift agreements, not just pledges, but gift agreements? And it was 50,000, 100,000. And I would ask, well, why don't you do it for 25,000? Why don't you do it for 10,000? What about the $2,500 donor that wants to make a gift for 4 years, a $10,000 commitment? Can they enter into a gift agreement? And can you book that? And the answer was, maybe we can, maybe we can't. And, we use email, we use verbal commitments. And it became clear that the creation of a really quick and easy digital gift agreement that not only created the gift agreement on the fly, but also did all the follow-up for the invoicing and for the collection of those mid-level gifts, so advancement services wasn't bogged down by the collection. That was going to be what scaled the ability for multi-year commitments to become part of the retention process. And I think what we learned, Dan sort of hit the nail on the head, retention is actually, that's the number one issue that everyone's going to be solving. We all know that it costs more to get a new donor than to retain a donor. But more importantly, you erode a relationship if you're not helping a donor and enabling a donor and inspiring a donor to make a gift many years in a row if they want to. The old adage of, I didn't give because the fundraiser never asked, that shouldn't happen. And so locking and enabling donors to enter multi-year agreements where they're saying, I'm going to commit for a bunch of years, I plan to, as long as you reach out to me. With the turnover we're seeing in fundraisers, with the sort of inconsistency in some data, with the inability to get to all donors, digital gift agreements have become part of that solution. Certainly not the whole solution, but can you allow a frontline fundraiser to create a gift agreement on the fly with a donor and inspire that donor to support the organization for many years to come? That was the problem we were trying to solve, and I think that's proven to be right.
Yeah, I would add.
How cool.
We ended up getting excited last year about Give Now, Pay Later, and Dan was still with us here at William & Mary at the time, and we were reflecting on the fact that our president describes our advancement team as the sandbox of the university, and by that she means we're willing to try, experiment, get our hands dirty, and see what works. And so we were game to try this, to give it a shot and see, particularly as we think about digital wallets and how different generations of donors are giving very, very differently. And digital gift agreements hadn't been on my radar. And now 3 months later, our team has found them to be indispensable. So we did a massive outreach last week where we had everyone on our team together in a big ballroom, reaching out to donors. And they found creative ways to partner together, to use ThankView to send a video, and then to follow that up with a Givesy agreement. Our athletics team, as an example, anyone who's worked in athletics fundraising before knows, in the month of June, they're making literally thousands of calls and outreach. And so the ability to have a donor not just say, sure, I'll make you a gift, but to make it actionable for them, and to have a regular cadence management to it is where we found great value here. So what I want my gift officers doing is asking once and then thanking multiple times versus asking. So if we can improve that retention and get a donor to be in a multi-year pledge, that's great for participation, it's great for longevity, and it's great for then the development officer to focus more on stewarding that donor rather than resoliciting them over and over again.
Yeah, I think the important thing to note is, or at least observe, is as an industry, we are evolving at such a rapid pace that technology is becoming more outdated or antiquated before we've actually begun to master it. And I think you're seeing that. Just a couple of comments I've seen, as an example of that. I don't think Give Now, Pay Later replaces recurring giving. And I think we lose too many donors due to credit card drops. That's why you see companies and merchant services now that are thinking about how to adapt the way that for-profit has to making certain that when a credit card expires, that there's a more automated way to retain that donor in that transaction. When we go back and look at what Adam has built with his latest opportunity, I go back 8 years prior when we built a giving page because we didn't get what we needed from our merchant manager. We wanted a shopping cart carousel. We wanted a donor experience that allowed for donors to search all the funds that they were interested in to easily itemize their giving. We also wanted to find a way to consolidate our reunion pledges, our 5-year commitments. And so we did all that on a merchant managing service page because there was no system that existed. I told Adam the first time he mentioned the latest approach to me, that would have solved that. We were actually using our gift processing system to replace the letters of commitment for under 5K donors because it was becoming too cumbersome for a team. For every time somebody made a $200 a year for 5-year commitment for their reunion to document it in a LOC. We moved it to the online page where they could document a 5-year pledge and their credit card gift, their first initial payment, which also helped participation, operated as their electronic signature. So that's an example of where we were solving something that was already behind 8 years ago. And then now Adam has a product that 8 years prior would have been highly beneficial. I don't know where we'll be 10 years from now, but as an industry, we're evolving in a way. We're rooted in data science. We're looking at what the for-profits are doing. And we're constantly behind and trying to play catch up. The credit card rates are one for recurring donors. And this multi-year gift strategy now is another example.
I remember, like I said, my mother was in gift processing and advancement services for a while. I opened up the checks, and I remember a conversation with her in the 90s. It was before they accepted credit cards online, and I remember her saying, "There's no way anybody will ever put their credit card in online. There's no way anybody will ever do it." But essentially, I mean, every technologist's job, every entrepreneur's job, if you're building technology, it's not to have the silver bullet. It's actually to build technology that allows people doing the work to dream and to be able to apply it in 1,000 different ways. And I think, Matthew and I talk about this all the time. What's the next use case for digital gift agreements? Looking at boards, looking at reunion cycles, looking at freshman parents who come in that say, "Listen, I'm going to make a gift every year. All you have to do is ask." Well, would you make a 4-year commitment right now and let's just lock it in so I don't have to ask, I don't have to bother you for the next 3 years, and I can just thank you and I can invite you to events and I can actually really steward you as opposed to collect on payments. But we're really essentially changing the frontline fundraisers dynamic with donors and allowing them to cultivate more donors in the rated but unassigned pools. And one of the theses that we have is essentially rated but unassigned donors. Every single rated donor should be solicited for a multi-year commitment. If every rated donor were solicited for a multi-year commitment, retention would be almost 100% with those donors, and you'll see major gifts pop up when the donor's life approaches that. So finding ways to build technology where people can dream is actually the gold standard in these type of partnerships.
Fantastic. To me, what it sounds like from the outside is that you've built a technological scaffolding for a really sound human fundraising, very solid I hate to use the word best practice, right? But you're supporting that. I remember Matthew and Dan, you came to the Donor Participation Project a year and a half ago. And you were speaking about the importance of these multi-year pledges. I don't know if you were already connected with Adam, but you were talking about this, and I've taken that in my practice ever since. Like it's dumb to not do multi-year pledges, right? Even at the annual fund levels. But now you've made it so easy. Okay, so I'd love to hear from people who are in the chat if they have needs that they've identified. Where they think that a technological solution would help them, and ask you, gentlemen, before we go into the last portion of our conversation, are you thinking of other areas that you think are ripe for innovation? I'm sure you have a laundry list of like 1 million items, but maybe the top 2.
I'd say stewardship. I think you're beginning to see the 2 of the last frontiers in advancement work that have yet to evolve as rapidly as some of the others, and stewardship is one. I think thank you is the first front of that, where it's making it far easier to engage more effectively and more authentically. But I think stewardship at all levels, from the way that we deliver impact reports to our top tier donors, to the way that we bring impact and transparency to our democratic donor base. And so that's my perspectives. I think donor relations is beginning to professionalize its way the way annual giving did 10 years ago, where you're seeing a portion of the industry become a solidified portion of the industry with folks that stay in those roles for long periods of time and innovate.
Yeah, I would totally echo stewardship. Stewardship's been one of the weak links in our profession for a long, long time. I think we got way better at asking before we got better at thanking, and that's been part of our retention problem. Is that as a profession, we're not great at doing that. Dan mentioned ThankView, which has been a great product from Evertrue, and I think finding more creative ways like that, where we can do a better job of stewarding our donors. There was a mention in the chat about cadence management, and I think some of the most successful partnership programs we have been able to leverage the cadence management. And I know that they've been able to do that with Give Campus. I know Evertrue, and then now Adam, I know you're doing that with GiveZ also. But the more we can build that cadence management in, to me, that's a useful opportunity for technology to extend the reach, to augment what our humans are doing, and to do much more so that our humans can focus on the high impact practices and doing that really, really well. I would love to be optimistic, Louis, but I don't know that I see huge levels of innovation across the profession. I was talking to another advancement leader this morning just about how slow our organizations have been to adopt relatively modest levels of technology. Certainly that's been the case in the places that I've worked in the past. And so I'm trying to do all I can to encourage that and to support it and to try to spur that on, because I think the more of it we have, the more of it we'll have. And again, not to replace the great work our humans do, but really to extend what our humans do.
Well, hugely appreciated. You're benefiting not only William and Mary, but the profession at large. And Dan, I'm sure you're going to be doing great strides. I have a kind of a question that will tie in everything we've spoken about today, which is you both have practical, verified experience doubling your donor base or more in a very short period of time, with the wrinkle that you maintained retention and high levels of engagement, donor care, all those things that keep donors around. Have you reflected on this, on what were the principles that guided you? And I'm sure some of the things that we've spoken about today will come up again. How did you do this? I mean, essentially, I guess it's what everybody would like to know.
The secret to my success was having a Dan Frezza. And so it is hard to replicate, but I give Dan entire credit for what we were able to build here at William & Mary over the last decade. I was seeking 10 years ago a direct report to me, an AVP for annual giving. And at the time, there were very, very few people who were a senior person at the table focusing on annual giving. And the objective we had was to make that not a subordinate to development or not a subordinate to alumni engagement, but really the person at the table who was thinking about, talking about, advocating for, and leading broad-based philanthropic engagement. And the way we tried to do this was not to find more ways to give more tchotchkes to more people, not to just be sort of kitschy about this the way I think, unfortunately, we've done far too often. But to focus on how do we start with education. So for us, that was building a student philanthropic education program that began as freshmen, not waiting until seniors, but began as freshmen, and having that be an educational program. We teach our students lots of great things. We ought to be also teaching them about long-term engagement and philanthropy. That's one. I mentioned Dan as a singular force. Another I would just say is leadership. Having had two presidents who believed in this, were willing to do it, it made all the difference in the world as the vice president to be able to really unleash the team. Last thing I'll say, my advice to our team, and this started with Dan and it continues today, is to take some risks, to try some new things, to experiment. If we're going to fail, let's fail and fail fast and then move on to the next thing. But if we continue to do what we've done every year, we really will never build broad-based support. And so I think we have to, as a profession, continue to take risks, try new things, and go out and experiment a little bit. So that's been part of our success here, in addition to just having Dan.
I'll say it clicked for me, believe it or not, in all things student affairs. I started as a student affairs practitioner. Aston's theory of student development: the more engaged a student is, the more academically successful they will be on campus. That is one of the greater truths in higher education. It was personally true for me. I became more involved in all things. So it began to question if we have engaged philanthropy. Do we create more active and engaged philanthropists? Do we create a donor base that is stronger and more resolute? And so that was where it started for me. And it began at Appalachian State, trying to create at the time what we think we were going to call the Student Duck Pond Society. There was a duck pond on campus that, I won't go into some of the traditions there, but one of which was folks would go swimming after a football win. But the idea was at App, I watched a chancellor back to leadership and Ken Peacock wake up one day and say, we have a football school and we want a tailgate tradition. We want a tradition where our alumni, our parents, our faculty, our staff, our friends come back and they're happy to be here. And so he was in the tailgate lots every weekend. He was running up and down the student line every weekend, and he was engaging folks. And so in much the same way, we built an engaged philanthropy model. Student philanthropy was the science behind it. There's a lot, and that's a whole geekier side that we can talk about with frequency and consecutive years giving. But if you graduate students with more history in being a philanthropist, it shouldn't shock you that you end up with an easier time to renew them as alums. And so there's science rooted in that, but the philosophy is engaged. I concur with leadership. We had President Andrew Shue with us this morning, dialing for dollars with every member of University Advancement here at the College of Charleston. We had President Taylor Reevely at William & Mary on back-to-back years of days of giving, subject to all sorts of Spielberg-like videography, in fun, whimsical, engaging ways. President Catherine Rowe, as I was leaving, had a great series that the pandemic sort of derailed, but I think surfaced this past year. Having leaders act as spokespeople on behalf of something that was so deeply buried over so long period of a time, I think is also quite helpful. Last, and I'll leave it with, is it has to be intentional and not transactional. I am the anti-Chotsky person. I used to stand up at every conference and say, if you give something away, you're going to pay the price for it, and you will. It's far more difficult to renew. There are a few instances in my career, very rarely, that I would ever subject our program to such, but they were rooted in intentionality. Do it in a way that's engaged. Do it in a way that shows just as much power and influence in stewardship and being thankful as it is in the art of asking. And I think you're going to pay off, far better in the long run.
Yeah. I think obviously you guys are. I think you're both being a bit humble. I know as a coach, as a CEO, and I think most importantly as a father, you never quite realize it in the moment, but people are always watching, and the people that you lead are always watching. And I think that what I've observed from you two in our relationships have been your kindness, your empathy. Matthew, your ability to take risks is sort of an extraordinary skill, and Dan, you as well. I think a lot of people don't have the foresight to know that if you don't take a risk, although you might fail, you definitely won't succeed. And giving people the ability to fail gracefully and move on, as opposed to be reprimanded, is a skill that not everybody has, but it's a lasting memory that people that are the recipient of that kindness always remember. And I don't think you succeed without those type of moments as leaders. And you guys are obviously at the top of that echelon.
Lovely. Well, I want to give people an opportunity to ask their last questions. I would say this is a rare and special opportunity to ask people who, I don't know, have done this stuff, and answer questions, etc. I think both Dan and Matthew and Adam, you're okay with people reaching out to you on LinkedIn?
Absolutely.
Other colleagues. So I invite everybody to do that. If you'd like the recording of today's session, it's going to live forever on LinkedIn, but we'll also save a copy in our donor participation project resource library. So I've put the link up there.
Louis, if I can just thank you.
It's been fantastic.
I want to thank you, Louis, for creating this and leading it, because I think in our profession, we've begun to skew so heavily toward the mega philanthropy, which is of course crucial to us, but you don't end up with mega philanthropy unless you think about broad-based donor participation. So it's awesome what you've created and continue to encourage. I think the more we can do to encourage our profession to think about both mega philanthropy as well as broad-based donor participation, it's just going to be critical. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Dan, I continue to pinch myself because I can't believe how lucky I am to be able to sit in a room, even if it's a virtual room, with all three of you. So I hope to stay in touch and to be able to continue to lift up your successes. So thanks so much to everybody.
Thank you so much.
Everyone. Do you want to say closing words?
We need broad-based,
There we go.
deep philanthropic engagement. Let's do it, folks.
Let's do it.
There you go. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank
Don't
you.
be afraid to innovate.